he is someone who, he'll be out at an event, someone will be like, "You're a socialist," and he'll be like, "Yep, now let's talk about the buses," right? And I think that, that seems like a simple enough strategy, but it's one that I think a lot of, sort of left-leaning candidates haven't adopted because there's this sense that they have to essentially be like apologizing for their policy prescriptions and their stances. And, Mamdani has not done that. He has fully embraced the positions that he's taken, the things he said. He's obviously been questioned a lot about certain, sporadic statements that he's made, and he's walked back on some very, very like minor points, like something he said about the police like years ago or whatever, and that's just politics for you. But for the most part, he very much embraces who he is and what his policy prescriptions are. And, he's someone who will say, yeah, we're going to get ICE out of New York City. We're going to, defend, we're going to freeze the rents the entire time that, I'm mayor. Can he get ICE out of New York City? Probably not, right? That there's not really a legal mechanism for that, but it doesn't really matter, right? You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. People like that. People, understand what he's trying to convey, even if, some of it is kind of, procedurally iffy. And so I think that, his sticking to the script and sticking to his message unapologetically, not, all the time saying sorry, sorry, sorry for having these positions, is partly what his secret sauce is. And that he just seems like a nice guy, go up to him on the street and have a conversation.
Now, that hasn't necessarily saved him from some pretty brutal coverage in the media. And we have to say the New York Times especially has spent a lot of ink reminding people of his position, criticizing U.S. support for Israel during the Gaza war, standing up for Palestinian rights, showing up at demonstrations. Coming to you, Osama, what, perhaps this is a leading question, are commercial media getting wrong about that part of his platform as it relates to his popularity?
I'm sure you've heard of this saying that you believe in one person that can change the world. I think that I do. Mamdani is one of those people because he is really changing the world from the largest city in the United States in this campaign. And he's changing a lot of things. And that's why the mainstream media is going after him, because the mainstream media, unfortunately, this is the same media that went for the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they beat the drums for war. And they helped George Bush and Tony Blair for their invasion of Iraq for unsubstantiated accusations of weapons of mass destruction. So I think that they have lost a lot of their respect and a lot of their readership because of this. And also social media has taken a toll on them as well, because they are telling what's happening. We know right now what Mamdani is saying, not through the New York Times, not through the Washington Post, unfortunately, but through social media. And it's making its way to the hearts and minds of people around the country. And that's why I believe one person can change the world. Mamdani is one of them.
Now, Asha will say, but there's a movement behind Mamdani, not to say a coalition. And I loved the phrase that you used in a recent discussion with our friend Dan Denver at The Dig, where you talked about the lessons of the Brandon Johnson experience there in Chicago as mayor for the Mamdani future. And you say we have experienced a certain amount of, I think you said, coalitional strain. What is the takeaway lesson, Asha, from Chicago so far, from your point of view?
Yeah. And I just want to appreciate Osama's point, which I think is an important complement to mine about movements and coalition, is that I do also think this is a time when we need leadership. And I think that we should want that. I think sometimes our communities are so used to being let down by people in positions of power that we actually take this posture that we don't want any power at all, or we don't want the people who are on our side to be successful. And so it's a growing edge to figure out how do we actually support and have the back of people who we do believe can be champions and can be leaders in their own right. And getting really good at being able to distinguish a leader when they are going to champion the demands and the vision of a movement.